We are doing a follow-up on the 2019 candidate guide questions that we'd asked you.
Yep.
And we plan on publishing the answers to this in social media or maybe on a paper format. We're not sure yet. So just to see how your answers have changed and if you still think the same, any of that.
Okay.
So we wanted to start by
Congratulations, Lily, on getting into Agnes Scott.
Thank you.
It's a great school.
Thank you.
Sorry, now I'm going to interject. Not only did she get in, she got a full ride.
Yes.
Really?
Awesome.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. That means a lot.
Is the Agnes Scott still all women?
Yeah, it is a women's college. I mostly applied to women's colleges.
Wow, that's interesting. Good for you. I hope it goes well.
Thank you.
Just remember, being a freshman can be hard, but it gets easier every year.
Where did you go?
Duke.
Oh, nice.
Way before you were born.
Yeah, I have a few friends going to Duke this year and they're very excited about it. So
good.
I will pass on the kind words.
Yeah.
So getting back to the candidate guide, the first thing we wanted to do is just follow up why you wanted to run for office in 2019. Then you had 3 answers: affordable housing, quality of life, and shared prosperity. And would you answer this question differently now, given the pandemic and everything that's happened?
Well, what I would say is that it's really interesting to hear that because, of course, what happened was the pandemic. And that really, I still have the same priorities, but of course, this new priority had to take precedence over everything else because, 220 members of our community have died from COVID, and more than 24,000 members of our community have contracted COVID that we know of, and it's far more than that. And we've had so much loss of employment and income, and businesses have suffered. So it's really forced me to have a new first priority. And then the second thing that's happened really, which only reinforces my original priorities, is the murder of George Floyd and the resistance that surfaced in the aftermath, the very righteous resistance. And that has really, caused me and many of us to redouble our efforts for racial equity. And that was always at the top of my list and the city council's list, but it's really just reinforced that.
Thank you. I know that you said you haven't been able to make as many things a priority given the pandemic, but have you been able to make progress on the $15 an hour minimum wage?
Well, the city has the $15 an hour livable wage, the county government, the school board, Duke University, and at the beginning of the year, lots of larger employers last year were announcing $15 wages, Walmart and so forth. So I think that there's good progress, but a long way to go on wages.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the city minimum now for an entering employee is $16.98. So we've been able to move that up, which is good.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear it. Next in the candidate guide, the second question we had was about the 2019 affordable housing bond, which you had drafted. What came of this? And if you could change your actions on it, would you?
No, that's been great. The $95 million affordable housing bond is part of a 5-year plan. And COVID is going to put that back some, so probably 6-year plan. And that $95 million is accompanied by another $65 million in city funds, so about $160 million plan. And we're going to be creating thousands of units for thousands of new and preserved affordable housing units for people that can't afford housing otherwise in Durham. And that's already going great. We have about 500 units in the pipeline, either being designed or constructed. And We just 82 units right behind the bus station, the transit station downtown. 82 units just came online. They're absolutely beautiful. And I think will change everybody's idea in Durham about what affordable housing can be and look like and be like for people. And so that work is going really well. It's gone well in spite of the pandemic. The big change has been that a lot of our work, and the thing that's delayed some of the work, is that we've had to do two different things. One is with people being faced with eviction, we've really had to emphasize within the city government. We got millions of dollars in federal assistance for rental assistance, which is great. And that the department, our city department that works on housing, has really had to pivot, to use the COVID word that everyone uses, to getting rental assistance out the door to thousands of people. And so in concert with the social services department of the county, we've done that rental assistance work. And the other thing that's happened is we've had more homeless people during COVID because people have had less money. And so we've had to do a whole lot. And one of the things that, as you know, Lily, our shelters, our homeless shelters are congregate facilities, and they're dangerous during COVID. But we had to decongregate our homeless shelters. We had to put people in hotels so that they could be safe during COVID. And we had to have a quarantine facility for homeless people who had nowhere to go. So, you know, we've had some very tough challenges on the housing front during COVID, but I think we've done a really good job rising to those challenges.
I'm really glad that you and City Council have been able to handle them.
Still a long way to go.
Yeah, absolutely, but progress is progress. Next, we had asked about transportation routes in Durham, specifically north and south, being connected to downtown through buses. You had stated that 80 more bus shelters would be built in the next 18 months. 18 months later, have those 80 more bus shelters been added?
I don't know the answer to that. That's a good question. A lot have been added, but I don't know if we've hit the 80.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question that I don't know the answer to. We have added a lot of shelters, and we have, but we still have the great majority of our bus stops still are without shelters. We have about 1,000 bus stops, and I think we're up to about 300 shelters. So we have a long way to go.
Mm-hmm. Has Durham still become more connected through public transportation, even with COVID-19?
Well, right prior to the pandemic, we had added some routes, which is good, and reduced the headways on some routes from every 30 minutes to every 15 minutes. So that was a good advance. But what happened during COVID is that, a lot of people stopped riding the bus. We had to decongregate our buses. And at the beginning, we were, let's just say we've had to do social distancing on the buses, and that's hard. And we had to make a big effort around masking. A lot of people get on our buses, they don't have masks. So we've given out now well over 200,000 masks on our buses. And there is a mask dispensers on our buses now. And our ridership fell to about 2/3 of its normal level because people weren't going to work, or they were afraid to go, or, they didn't have a job anymore, or whatever. So it really reduced our bus ridership. That's creeping back up. And we have added some routes and shortened some headways, but that's another area where we have a long way to go. Okay.
Thank you. So I know you had touched on this, but the next question concerned policing in the candidate guide. The city has taken many, give me a second. The city has taken many steps towards equitable treatment, but there are still noticeable differences in police stops and arrests for certain ethnic and racial groups. What steps have you taken to make policing in Durham more equitable?
Yeah, so still a big issue. And I already mentioned the situation with George Floyd. I will say that after George Floyd's murder, when there were demonstrations all over the country, and a lot of police departments were very aggressive, that our police department did a great job of supporting people and exercising their First Amendment rights. There was no big police presence. There was no tear gas, none of that. And I think that led to the demonstrations in Durham being very, very righteous, very strong, but also very peaceful.
Mhm.
And our police did a great job on that. We make a tremendous amount of effort for policing equity in terms of who we recruit, in terms of our misdemeanor diversion program, our training in racial equity and crisis intervention for our officers. So there's a lot of work that goes on around that Chief Davis and her team do, and I think that has helped. We now have established, we're really trying to reduce unnecessary contact and over policing in communities of color. And so one of the things we're doing, we've just put additional funding into the Bull City United program. The city's putting about $1 million into that to add 4 new neighborhoods for our violence interrupters, which is great. We started the Community Safety and Wellness Task Force, which will meet in late April, for the first time, to come up with ways that we can respond to 911 calls that are other than with a person with a gun and a badge. So mental health response, social service response, that kind of thing. We've done a study of our 900,000 911 calls over the last 3 years, and those 911 calls, what we've done is we've looked at what kind of calls they are, and do police need to respond, or can other people better respond? A nurse, a social service person, a counselor. Excuse me. So we're still doing a lot in that, and we're really working very hard on equitable policing, and I think we're making a lot of progress. Still got a ways to go. It seems like every our answer is the same, Lily. We're doing good. We're making some progress, but we got a long way to go.
COVID is definitely going to set back for that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can definitely attest to the fact that the police response to the protests this summer in Durham was very different than the one I saw in Raleigh.
It was. Yeah.
So I'm glad I live where I do.
Good.
Did crime rates continue to decrease since fall 2019?
No. That's been one of the worst aspects of COVID, both around the country and in Durham, which is that we've seen a huge spike in gun violence. Nationally, homicide rates have risen at their highest in many, many years. Our homicides did not go up this year, but the number of shootings did. It went from 189 to 319 in a year. And we had been dropping, year after year. So this was huge. And I'm worried about this year as well, because there's so much economic dislocation. Young people have not been in school. People your age have been on the street and under the influence of the streets at times. Mental health issues have risen during COVID. And it's been a time of really terrible gun violence in Durham, but also really around the country.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Would you have answered the question about policing differently now, given everything that happened in 2020?
I don't think so. I think that it didn't take the death of George Floyd for us to know that we needed to make police reform. That's something we've been working on in Durham. It's certainly heightened our awareness. As I said earlier, it's really redoubled our commitments. But I think the things we were doing, we were moving in the right direction with the Community Safety and Wellness Task Force, with the 911 call analysis, the other reforms that we're making. So I feel good about that.
Definitely. Thank you. We had one more question that we'd asked in 2019 that we'd like to follow up on. It was about jobs for youth and your plan to increase them.
Yeah.
Obviously, for unforeseen circumstances, the Youth Works program was canceled. How is it coming back this year?
Oh, that was such bad news. And I think that's part of our violence problem, honestly. Young people with nothing to do and, time on their hands. And we are bringing it back this year. And we will have a combination of in-person and online, virtual internships. The applications are now open, and we're starting to get applications. The last I heard, I think we had 80 applicants, and I'm sure that will go up a lot now that we're going to really be making it more publicized. So I think that I am hopeful that this year we'll get back to 200 interns. I'm not sure we'll get that high, but that is what I hope for. But our goal is 1,000 eventually, and we were improving, but COVID, as you say, really set us back.
Mm-hmm, definitely. I actually applied for it this year, so I'm hoping that's something.
Oh, good. Super. Let me know how that goes, will you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Stay in touch and let me know what happens.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to know how the process is for you, Lily.
I just saw that the application is open because the National Honor Society advisor at my school sent it out, and we'll see what happens. Good.
Keep me informed.
I will.
You know, I just was wearing my Riverside soccer shirt. I just took it off for this. I'll show it to you.
I like how he disappears into the Durham flag when he walks away.
Yeah. See, I was wearing my Pirate soccer shirt, but then when I was going to do this interview, I thought, well, I better dress up for Lily. So I changed my shirt, but that's what I was wearing beforehand. I'm a Pirate all the way.
I appreciate it. So we also had a few new questions that we had wanted to ask. The first one was, what do reparations mean to you, and how do you think the city should handle this issue in the coming 2 years?
Well, in my last State of the City address, I haven't given it this year, but in my last one, right before the pandemic, I called for a national program of reparations and asked that, and pledged that we in the city of Durham would take a leadership role in that with other mayors. Subsequent to that, we worked with the U.S. Conference of Mayors. I was on a group that we got a resolution supporting HB 40, which is the bill that would nationally push the reparations movement forward. The U.S. Conference of Mayors endorsed that. And I've been working with Sandy Darity and Kirsten Mullen here in Durham, who are kind of two of the real intellectual leaders on that. And so Sandy and Kirsten believe, and I believe, that reparations really needs to happen on a national basis. Because if you're really talking about payments to people, which I believe we are, you need to have a progressive income tax that funds that. We don't have the income tax here in Durham. We have sales tax and property tax, and neither one are as progressive as the income tax can be or is. And so in order, what you want with reparations is basically the federal government to make payments to people who are descendants of enslaved people. And in order to do that, you really need to have, the ability to tax people, and especially to tax progressively, so that the people who are richer pay more. And so that's why Sandy and Kirsten believe it should be a national project, as do I. We can do a lot of things in Durham that are reparative, our affordable housing work, our bus system, just to take two things we've talked about, our youth works internships. I mean, most of the work that we do are, they're our African American, our Black and Brown communities are, in the case of, think about reparations, our African American community is really positively impacted by those programs. The vast majority of people who will be taking advantage of affordable housing will be African American. And so these are things that are reparative. But if you're actually talking about reparations, you're talking about a national program. And I'm a big advocate for that. I'm a member of a small group of mayors around the country that's been working for that on a national basis.
I'm very glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Next question. You touched on this earlier. What do you think the current mental health needs are, and how does this and should this impact city policy in the police department, teen and youth centers, and other places?
Great question. Well, I think that mental health has really been stressed during the pandemic, no question. You're talking specifically about young people. I mean, having to do school online, what a crazy thing. And some students do it really well, it's no problem, and many students do not. And I know I have 2 children. One of mine wouldn't have made it for 10 minutes on that. And so the mental health problems have been severe, the isolation, the inability to be with friends, all the things that you've experienced and I've experienced and Carolyn's experienced. It's just been terribly stressful on so many people. And this isolation has caused a lot of mental health problems. And so these are things we need to take into account. I think we've already talked about sort of the mental health aspects of policing and how that needs to change. Our students need an incredible amount of support. Our young people need an incredible amount of support, whether it be the YouthWorks internship, whether it be our recreation centers that are now going to be, gradually starting to reopen. I'm worried. I'm worried about our kids coming out of the lockdown. I think there are a lot of implications. The mental health services themselves are provided by Alliance through the county, not through the city. And those services are really crucial, but the city has less to do with that work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have a friend who applied for a lifeguard position at the recreation center. So she's really happy that they're opening back up.
I am too. Yeah.
Thank you. And what 2 to 3 issues do you think will be most important for the city to address in the last 2 years of your term?
Well, I've got less than 2 years now. I've got 6 months or so. But I think nothing that's changed from what you've said, policing, both being able to fight violent crime effectively and not to over police in communities of color, and so police reform as well as effective policing against violent crime, affordable housing, and continuing to do that work and, pushing that ahead, which we are, which is great. And then, getting our bus ridership back up, getting all the things we've talked about, getting our youth back into our centers and our pools and getting the YouthWorks internship program back, which you've applied for, which is awesome. And then continuing to try to bring us back from the pandemic. So, keeping people safe, continuing to making sure we have vaccine equity. That's a big deal. We don't have vaccine equity. And my next meeting at 6:00 is a meeting with vaccine providers about vaccine equity. So this is really important that we do that we bring our city back. And then through all the making sure that we have enough rental assistance to try to protect people when the eviction moratorium ends. And making sure that we're doing all the work to help bring our small businesses back. And that's really hard. A lot of them have suffered, a lot have gone out of business. So just continuing to bring the city back from the COVID pandemic.
It's hard, but we can do it. So last, we have a fun question, as always. So the pandemic has affected all of us differently. So what's a new skill you've learned or a favorite place to get takeout from in Durham, or a hobby you've picked up over the past year?
No, well, that's a great question. I think my favorite place, I don't know, I've gotten pickup. I really like Roses, Roses across from DSA.
Yes.
I've gotten pick up there a lot this year, which I've really enjoyed. My new skills and hobbies, I have mainly been pursuing old skills and hobbies, which are cooking. I've been cooking a lot, and then, sport as cycling and running and stuff. So trying to think if there's anything new. And I've been reading a ton, but those are things I've always done. I don't know if I've got a new hobby. I wish I had. I think a lot of people had some extra time, but I haven't had any extra time. Being mayor has really been hard this year.
Definitely.
So I don't think I've had time to pick up a new hobby.
Well, there's always plenty of time to learn.
Yep.
So thank you for talking today.